Welcome to another Ask Philip. Today is April 26, 2024. And this is the time when I answer your very specific questions to help you get unstuck, help you move forward in your health and fitness journey. Remember the Ask Philip, the hashtag Ask Philip service in our Facebook community, the Wits and Weights Facebook group is intended to get you a little bit more personalized feedback on your questions. If you have a not generic, but if you have a more general question for the podcast, there's actually a couple ways to send that in. One is just message me across all ways to do that on social media, Instagram at Wits and Weights, Facebook or Facebook group, YouTube, whatever. And the other way is actually a new feature I wanted to tell you about today, and that is you can now send a text message to the show. So if you, like, for example, if you pull up the podcast, the Wits and Weights podcast in your podcast app. Now I'm showing it on desktop here, but if you have it in your, let's say, Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen to it, you'll now see a link that says send me a text message. And that's a one-way secure text message through the hosting provider where you don't have to share your information or phone number or anything like that. I will not be texting you back. This is mainly to throw in a question for the show or feedback or something like that. But I pretty much guarantee if you send me something, it's going to end up on the show somehow, unless you don't want me to, and I'll definitely give you a shout out. So take advantage of that. But for today's Ask Philip, we do have a question about protein. It's a good one. I'm going to pull up some of the latest information related to protein, including the 100 gram at one time study that everybody's been talking about from late 2023. We'll talk about it in a second. Before we do, just quick announcements today for the podcast. Today's episode that is out is an interview with Haley Fountain, and she's a kind of a hormone health coach. She's an expert in all the hormones, but we specifically drilled in on thyroid, and I really drilled her with a lot of good questions. We had a great conversation, good rapport on hormone health, metabolism, fat loss. We talked about supplements. We talked about lifting and movement and the mind-body connection, sleep, stress, everything. She's also a yoga instructor, so she's definitely into like mindfulness and yoga type activities. But a lot of, we align pretty much fully here on the approach, and also that it has to be personalized. So even though she works with women primarily, this episode would be applicable to everyone who has a thyroid, which is all humans, unless you have it removed, of course. I apologize. But yeah, it's a very important gland when it comes to our hormones, and there's a relationship between thyroid and cortisol and your hunger hormones, and it's all interrelated, just like we talk about all the time. So this is a really good episode for that, and she's a great communicator. So check that out and share it with people. I mean, if you know anyone struggling with hypo or hyperthyroid conditions, they're worried about their thyroid, maybe their metabolic rate is lower than they thought it should be, maybe they've experienced some weight loss resistance, share it with them, because there could be a simple change, a simple behavioral change that could unlock your thyroid health. It's not just about supplements and T3, T4, replacement or anything like that. There are very, very simple things. Two of them, for example, I'm just going to tell you right now. One is not under eating. Like the fact that a lot of you have been under eating, especially women, for a long time. We do talk about that a lot in the context of just energy in general. But for thyroid health, it can be actually quite detrimental and have caused issues that appear to be hormone imbalances, but they're really just lack of energy. And then the other tip that I was going to give here is, and drum roll because is not fasting, not doing intermittent fasting, not skipping breakfast. Actually having a nice wide feeding window, you might find can be a massive improvement in your thyroid health. And the fact that you've been fasting could be causing the blood sugar issues, the thyroid and cortisol issues, especially since the fasting tends to extend into the morning hours when the cortisol curve is at its highest, and it starts to disrupt a lot of things. So just right there, those are two of many tips that Haley shares in here. And one last thing, we recorded, let's see, is it in here? Yeah. It's hard to see this green mint font on the desktop, but we recorded a 13-minute bonus Q&A video. So I interviewed her with a bunch of Q&A from our community. Many of you who are in the Facebook community or YouTube or who follow the podcast sent in your questions. We had like 6 or 7 questions from men and women about like supplements, lifting, what about when you're older, what about menopause, like all these things related to thyroid. She answered them all. We didn't have time to get into the main episode. So it's a bonus YouTube video. The only way to get that is to click on this link and you can download it. So I'm offering it to anyone who is on the Wits and Weights email list. You click this link and it'll just take you to witsandweights.com/bonus. Get on that today or by the end of the weekend, because it's going to go out on Monday, the bonus link with Haley. All right, so that's for today. In case you missed it earlier this week, we had some quick wits on maximizing your gains in minimal time. So those are 3 intensity techniques that I really like. And also, the surprising reason you don't look like you lift. One of those things people often shortchange in the process that is simple but not easy. And you have to listen to the episode to see what I'm talking about. And then we had a very, what's turning out to be a very popular episode out on Tuesday. It's one of my longer solo episodes. And this one is all about body recomposition. And it's about 45, 50 minutes long. And I go through my entire blueprint for body recomp, the 3 different categories where you can recomp, how to use nutrition, how to set your macros, where strength training fits in, peri-workout nutrition, everything. Okay, so check that out. And then I offered a bonus video on how to set up Macrofactor for body recomp. Totally free video. This is literally just a YouTube link, no opt-in or anything. So if you want that, check it out. Okay, so I'm going to close that. And we're going to get to the question today under Ask Philip. Now, again, Ask Philip, hashtag Ask Philip is a thread posted weekly. My man Alan on my team, Alan Friedman, he posts it Friday afternoons. Then you can post your question by the following Thursday, and I will answer it in this live Friday. So we had a good question today from Isis about, and for those of you who missed it, Isis was on the podcast in the past. Let's see. I'll have to share the episode. Let's see. Episode 144. So if you go to witsandweights.com/144, or you go browse for that in your podcast app, you can find the episode that we did together about her incredible transformation journey. And she asked a really good question about protein today. Her question is it true that the body's muscle protein synthesis threshold is 20 to 30 grams per meal? If so, should I ideally consume protein in 5 meals to reach my goal of 140 grams? At this point, that will be easily done if needed, but I'd rather just do 3 meals per day for sure. Okay, so already we have a few questions. One about protein synthesis threshold, right? Sometimes called the leucine threshold. Also, does that mean I need to consume more frequently? My goal is 140 grams. My lifestyle and for convenience in my schedule, I'd rather do 3. All right, so some interesting themes we want to touch on in a bit here. Continuing with her question, I know the most important thing is macros and training, but if this information is accurate, it means now my body is just using maximum 90 grams of protein for muscle synthesis, and the other 60 grams is then used for energy, same as carbs or fats. And right away I'm saying, no, that's not happening, but we're going to get into the nuances in a second. So if that were the case, I'd definitely split up the protein into 5 takes. And how far away should the intakes be? So the short answer is you don't have to sweat it, Isis. This is going to be, you're going to like the answer, okay? It's going to be a much more practical approach, and I'll explain why. And I'm but I realized that recently I think 2 issues ago in the Mass Research Review from Stronger by Science, Eric Trexler wrote an article where he referred to the famous study now about the 100-gram protein in one sitting. The study is called The Anabolic Response to Protein Ingestion During Recovery from Exercise Has No Upper Limit in Magnitude and Duration in Vivo in Humans by Tromelin et al., 2023. And the teaser in Eric's article, which is titled, How Much Protein Can You Really Use from a Single Meal? The teaser says, it's often said that a mere 20 to 25 grams of protein can maximize the muscle protein synthesis response to a meal. Are you wasting protein when you consume more? A new study investigates. So it's effectively the same question that you were asking, Isis. And, I went through this article just to get a refresher. I've definitely been following this a lot as a nutrition coach. You've probably heard a lot of podcasts talk about it. There's a little bit of misinterpretation going on as well. But Eric's article and as well the study itself goes into these concepts of protein intake, of muscle growth, and it's important to understand what's going on so that we can take some practical takeaways here. All right, so the study itself by Tromelin et al. Basically challenges what you're asking about, the muscle protein synthesis threshold, right, or the leucine threshold. And the study found that protein ingestion increased MPS, muscle protein synthesis rates, in a dose-dependent manner. All right, so it actually followed the dose. So the more protein you had, the more it increased. So 100 grams of protein in one meal led to greater synthesis than 25 grams in one meal, or 0 grams in one meal. And this suggests clearly that there may not be a practical upper limit to the quote unquote anabolic response to protein ingestion. Now, I'm not telling everybody you should go and eat 100 grams of protein in a meal and kind of do the opposite. That's not what this is saying. This is saying that perhaps it doesn't really matter that much, that the body is really good at utilizing nutrition for what it's for. And if you are doing the other things, if you are doing the training, giving the stimulus, getting the energy you need in terms of just overall calories, because Isis, I know you mentioned, you said macros and training are most important. And the only thing I would challenge that is to say, energy overall and the utilization of that energy is probably the most important, like the energy balance and the calories, and then the composition of those calories in terms of macros. But I'm splitting hairs. I don't mean to suggest anything you said was wrong, because that's totally the case, and I know what you meant. So there may not be an upper limit. Now, according to the people that I respect who've reviewed the study, the study itself kind of fills a gap. It explains this discrepancy between the acute protein synthesis studies, okay, the ones that basically look at a very small feeding window, or don't look at it over time, over days, over weeks, or whatever, and the long-term hypertrophy studies that look at different groups of protein intake and have found and supported the fact that it didn't seem to matter that much. All right, and so the findings of this study indicate that higher protein doses can be more beneficial than we previously thought, right? Particularly when we consider the extended duration of the anabolic response, the muscle protein synthesis. Now, Eric in his article also cites studies that compare the effects of different meal frequencies on like body composition and hypertrophy. So he cites Taguchi et al. 2021, Yasuda et al. 2020. And these studies suggest that while like higher meal frequencies, 3 to 6 a day, what you're suggesting, like do I have to do higher meal frequencies, might slightly optimize long-term hypertrophy, the differences between the lower frequency of like even 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day and the higher are small. Like they're very small. Could you argue there is a difference? Maybe, but it's so small that practically it doesn't matter if the trade-off is not worth it for you in your life. And for most people, it's not going to be worth it. It's just not. Like that subtle in the noise trade-off is not going to be worth upending everything you do just to have more protein feedings. So long story short on that is that you can make massive and significant and meaningful and perfectly good enough progress with lower meal frequency, even if we're, again, saying it's not optimal, right? And by optimal, I mean, instead of at 99.9%, you're at 98.9%, okay? So if we apply this to your situation, consuming your target of 140 grams across 3 meals instead of 5, it's probably not going to matter. It's probably just fine, okay? It's not going to impact your muscle growth as long as you do the other things. You hit your daily protein target as a total. That's the most important thing. And you engage in well-designed resistance training, training hard, proximity to failure, progressive overload, right? That's the big thing here. And then, of course, your nutrition plan has to work for you. It's got to be convenient. It's got to be sustainable. All the things. And you and I know this, and you know this. You've learned this. You're kind of a poster child for sustainability and eating in a way that doesn't feel restrictive and doesn't feel like it's against your values and your life. So if we look at the evidence, from what I understand as a nutrition coach, from what we're seeing in the space, okay, spreading protein across 3 to 6 meals at most gives you a tiny, tiny, tiny advantage for long-term hypertrophy, but the difference between that and consuming fewer larger doses is very small. And the key takeaway here is hit your daily protein, follow a resistance training program that works for you and your lifestyle. All right. And well, I wanted to add one little bonus here. So I said, okay, if you've got 140 grams to hit, for anybody listening, let's say you're a woman and you don't get enough protein yet, you're at like 60 or 70 grams a day, which is pretty common to be at that level or lower for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons is you're skipping breakfast or you're not having very much protein in your breakfast, and you essentially fall behind right from the beginning. And then you feel like you have to eat this overwhelming amount of protein in your subsequent meals. Now, right there, that's one reason to have more frequent meals just to get your protein. But if it's not practical for you to do that, or let's say you just don't have the calories to support that, or you personally, your hunger gets triggered, or some other element of biofeedback or lifestyle doesn't work with like 5 meals, that's fine. You can have 3. And if you have 3, you can do something like this. Number 1, breakfast. 4 whole eggs will give you 24 grams of protein. A cup of oats will give you 12 grams of protein. And a scoop of, let's say, whey protein powder will give you another 24 grams. So eggs, oatmeal, protein, and of course, I love adding micronutrients in the form of like berries to your oats, for example, or spinach to your eggs, or whatever makes sense. But that's 60 grams of protein for breakfast. Like if you want to get off to a very strong start, eggs, oats, protein powder, things like that, especially if you work out in the morning, then you're going to probably have some maybe pre and post. I'm fine with you supplementing with protein powder, and if you're going to do it, that's a good time to do it in the morning or around your workout. If you're vegan, vegetarian, you can go with a pea rice blend. If you want to avoid protein powder altogether and just get it from Whole Foods, have some more egg whites in there, right? Have some egg whites, or even have some leftover chicken or something from dinner the night before. But have a nice hearty breakfast with a decent amount of protein. That gets you off to a fine start at 60 grams out of the 140. Then we fast forward to lunch, and we're looking at some form of, now granted, this is for an omnivorous diet, right? This is with animal products, so I'm not speaking to plant-based. That's a whole different thing. But yeah, we're going to, let's say, I don't know, grilled chicken breast is like the classic. But if you like chicken thighs, if you have leftover pork, if you want to do some ground beef, some lean ground beef or steak or whatever. But let's say, 6 ounces of grilled chicken breast, that's going to give you a whopping like 35, 40 grams of protein right there. Let's say you have some rice. That's got a little bit of protein, but I don't really eat rice for protein. I think of it as a carb. And then vegetables. Throw in some vegetables there. Maybe there'll be some protein. I don't really care. You're getting most of the protein from the meat. And that's lunch. And then we fast forward to dinner. Remember, we're not doing any snacks. We're just doing 3 meals here. Dinner, some other form of meat. Maybe your lean ground beef. Same thing, like 6 ounces. That's like 150 to 180 grams of ground beef. I mean, this is a pretty filling amount of meat. It's a pretty filling amount. 36, 40 grams of meat right there, or of protein, I mean. Then you have some potato maybe. Potato is a great starch. It's filling as well, so if your calories are low, I love potatoes. Again, that has a tiny bit of protein, but we're using it as a carb. And then some sort of vegetable, right? Broccoli, Brussels sprouts. I love all the cruciferous vegetables, which, by the way, another plug for the podcast today with Haley Fountain. She talked about different types of foods, including vegetables, that will help your thyroid because of the minerals they contain, whether that's magnesium, zinc, copper, selenium, and so on. All right, so I just wanted to give you an example. Super, super simple, bare bones way to like meal plan your way into the appropriate amount of food. If you definitely have room for another snack or two in there, that's where I like dairy products, for example, like cottage cheese or Greek yogurt. Or if you can't eat dairy or don't want to eat dairy, there's, again, other animal products like meat or eggs, or plant-based proteins you can fit in there. But again, you have to think of, you don't want to be having 5 meals that are like each 10 grams of protein. We want to hit our total daily protein. So if breakfast has to be 80 grams of protein, or even the 100, like in the study, it's okay. It's actually okay. And then as long as you get your total protein for the day, you're good. All right. So I hope that answers your question, as well as gave you some extra things to consider, a little bit of a sample meal plan as well to consider, and have fun with it. Get your protein, keep training, stay strong, everyone. I'll see you on the other side. Enjoy your weekend.